Fantasy bond is an illusion of fusion or connection, which starts out early in life, where the child connects to the parent, usually the mother, primary caretaker, in a way as to deny separation anxiety or pain in psychological pain in life. So the child forms an imaginary connection with the mother that heals the fraction of separation anxiety. And basically then they feel secure. They're both parent and child in the same person. And they go on to extend that into their life. So it's a fantasy of connection or fusion. Mm-hmm. That gives an illusion of really a feeling of pseudo-independence, an independent system. And when under threat, successive separation anxiety experiences, the child uses the fantasy bond to cope with the anxiety and to allay the anxiety. And it becomes a pattern of self-protection.
And then they get into a relationship, and then how does it?
They extend it. They extend the fantasy bond into the new relationship. What happens? They start off really relating to some extent, and then they gradually their defenses come into play, and that limits the real relationship. They pull back, but they retain a fantasy of being in love, of being kind, of being in a close relationship. All the while, they may not be responding in that way.
So the real quality of the relating between the two people deteriorates.
Yeah, the more they depend on the relationship for security, give up their original identity, and make that connection with each other, the more they give up the real substance of the relationship for the form and the fantasy. And so gradually over time, they replace what real relating with a fantasy of closeness, and there's usually a deterioration in the relationship as the person relies more on the fantasy bond. It seems to be incompatible. If they go for fantasy gratification and that illusion of fusion, and they make that connection, they give up somehow the substance or the real closeness, the sharing, the actual companionship, the actual loving operations, the respect for one another, the respect for each other's boundaries. So as a relationship develops, people very often get into this fantasy bond. And basically, the fantasy bond exists to the extent and in proportion to the frustration and pain. The more pain and frustration, the more reliance on the fantasy process. They lose themselves in this type of making this type of connection, and they tend to. There's a certain need to control the other, to maintain the illusion, and in that they lose themselves, and even in attempting to control the other, they lose themselves to some extent. And it just in forming, and sometimes it takes the form of a strong over-dependent type of relationship, or a kind of interconnectedness where one is dominant, one is submissive, and these patterns persist powerfully. What they fragment, when people are threatened, they fragment into both a parental element, a critical parent, and an infantile child element. And so they act out different aspects of those points of view. Mm-hmm. And they tend to act out one or the other part in their relationships.